Welcome to the E-commerce Badassery Podcast, the place for scrappy entrepreneurs who want to learn actionable steps and strategies to grow the traffic, sales, and profit in your e-commerce business. I'm your host, Jessica Totillo-Coster, a 20-year retail veteran and former brick-and-mortar boutique owner who spent 3 years as the only employee of a 7-figure online store. That shit was crazy. I know exactly how it feels to do all the things, and I'm sharing everything I learned the hard way so you don't have to. I may have started this business by accident, but supporting badass bosses like you lights me the fuck up, and I am so stoked to see you grow. Are you ready, babe? Let's roll. Welcome back to the E-commerce Badassery Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Totillo-Coster. Today, I'm joined by Katie Hunt of Proof to Product to review the State of the Product Industry survey she facilitated earlier this year. Katie is a dear friend of the E-commerce Badassery Podcast, having already appeared 2 times on the show. First on episode 51, Getting Your Product on Store Shelves, and episode 256, How to Market Your Business in 2024. This was actually an episode we recorded for her podcast that I aired here as well. If you don't know Katie, she is a podcast host, business strategist, and community builder for product-based business owners. Since 2011, she has helped thousands of brands get their products on the shelves of retail stores, big and small. She is also the creator of Paper Camp, a 4-week intensive coaching program that combines independent study with weekly live group coaching calls and a private community for support in between meetings. She's getting ready to run her 44th round of the program, making it the longest running wholesale program out there, which is so impressive. I've had many students and clients who have gone through it and absolutely love it. Before we get into the results of the survey, the takeaways, and our thoughts about the whole thing, I wanted to give you details on the participants so you have a frame of reference for their answers. I also recommend you head to prooftoproduct.com/2024 survey so you can follow along with the details of the survey and see the graphs and additional resources Katie provided. I will also add additional episodes and resources for you in the show notes that will help you with all the things we talk about today. Okay, so who responded to this survey? There were 925 business owners who anonymously filled out this survey. 95% of them are product sellers who make and resell their own items, and that makes perfect sense because that is the majority of Katie's audience. A large majority of these respondents are from the US. 50% of them have been in business for 6+ years, 32% of them for 3 to 5 years, and then 18% have been in business for 2 years or less. The annual revenue ranges from $25,000 to $1 million+ per year. And it's kind of interesting how this breaks down. So 48% make less than $50K per year in revenue in their business. 36% of them are over 6 figures. And then 3% reported annual revenue over $1 million. Now, one caveat here, and we do kind of talk about this in the episode, and she calls it out in her recap as well. What we don't know and what she's going to ask next time around is if these businesses are people's full-time gigs. Is it a side hustle? Do they have a full-time job? Is it a part-time business? We don't have insight into that. What I can say is when you look at the hours that people work, which we do talk about in the episode, they're working a lot of hours, which leads me to believe that this is likely a full-time or 3/4 time business for most people. All right, so now that you've got that frame of reference, let's hop into the episode. Hey, Katie, welcome to the show. Excited to have you back.
Jessica, I'm excited to chat with you today. There's so much going through my brain, which I know we've talked about privately, but it's fun to talk about it now publicly.
Yes, 100%. Katie and I, we spent a lot of time on Voxer together talking about all the things. But first, I just want to thank you for taking the time, energy, the effort of putting this survey together, because I can only imagine how heavy a lift it was. But like you said, your whole reason for doing this was business owners are curious what's going on. But also, I think they need a realistic sense of the industry. And I think that gave us that. And what I was just saying to you before we started recording was the most fascinating piece to me is most business owners I talk to think everyone else around them is doing better than they are and better than they think they're doing. That's not the right language, but you get what I'm trying to say, right?
Everyone thinks everyone's running a 6 or 7 figure business online,
Right.
and they're not.
And they're not. And what the data shows us, even if they are, they're not really paying themselves all that much, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But do you find that with your students and clients too, that they sort of have, I don't want to say warped because it sounds kind of negative, but like this warped idea of what the truth and reality is?
I think it's twofold. I think there's a warped reality of what the truth is, which was one of my main reasons for wanting to conduct this survey. And then the second piece is, I think there is some unrealistic expectations about what people are working towards. Meaning, am I setting arbitrary financial goals for my business, or am I setting strong goals that are meaningful? Meaning, does it support the life I want to live? And that's what's driving my financial goals within the business, right?
Right.
I think there's a lot of folks that are like working towards this arbitrary number of, oh, I got to make 6 figures, or I've made it when I've made this number. But really, that number, it doesn't really affect how they're living their life, or causing all this stress to get to that number. And then they get to that number and they're like, oh, I don't need this much money, or I actually need more money, or whatever it might be. Right. But it's not an educated estimate or an educated financial goal. And so I think doing this survey allowed us to really see, what are people earning? What are people taking home? And it's giving people a gut check of, what do I truly need to earn in this business to lead a good, happy, healthy life?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So important. And I've had guests on the podcast before talk about how when they pulled back on their business, right? They had this huge business and they had all these employees and all of this stuff. And then, whether by choice or happenstance, they shrink their business down. It's a much leaner team. They're doing maybe half the revenue or 75% of the revenue, but they're putting more money in their pocket at the end of the day. And so, big business doesn't equal big profit. And some of the numbers here, and guys, there will be a link in the show notes where you can go look at all of the results for this survey. But what is interesting to me is 36% of participants bring in over 6 figures, so 100K plus in annual revenue. But 15% of respondents are paying themselves less than 25K a year. Like, I just thought that was totally bonkers. And 48% of participants report annual gross revenue less than 50K. So it's just like the math is not mathing.
That was, frankly, as I was crunching these numbers and looking at the responses, I'm like, wait a minute, this has to be wrong. This has to be wrong, because people are working far too hard for the amount of money that they're taking home. And it was shocking. I agree with you. It was shocking.
Yeah, it is so shocking. And so I know this is a lot of what you and I sort of dove into, and we're like trying to find the correlations between what they're making, what they're bringing home, what they're doing in their marketing. And, we can dig into a little bit more of this, but I think the overall consensus was doing too many things, not enough payoff, and just spread way too thin.
Totally. And one other thing I want to add here for the conversation, for the sake of our listeners, understanding this, 61.5% of the people that responded, and I should mention we had over 925 brands that participated in this survey. 61.5% are running their businesses alone, meaning no support, no employees, no contractors. It's just them. So that also sheds a lot of light on what some of these numbers are spanning out to be. There are people with teams, of course, and we'll get into that in a little bit, but that was a shocking number for me too, to see such a large percentage of people who are not leveraging expertise and additional hours of other people to make their lives easier in this.
When you actually, to that point, when you first released the results, and I posted it in Circle where I kind of host all my courses and stuff, but I did make it out to everyone. And I think I emailed this out too. and kind of going over some of the top level numbers and what they meant to me. And the comments and the response to that basically was, my primary takeaway was that I 100% need to be less shy about outsourcing stuff. Delegate, delegate, delegate. And so, we'll get into some of the more nitty gritty, but I just wanted to set the stage for where this conversation is going because, there's a ton of numbers that you guys can go look at. But at the end of the day, this is really what it sums up to be. So let's dive in a little bit to the specifics in terms of the marketing piece, because you talk to people about what channels they're marketing on, which channels are actually giving them the best results. And there was a bit of a mismatch there.
Yes, there was. There was. It was really fascinating to see. And I think this also goes back to what we were discussing earlier in this episode of the expectations and the shoulda, woulda, couldas that we put on ourselves of everyone else I know is on these platforms. I need to be on these platforms. And I think that came out in the survey data a little bit. So the most utilized marketing methods in this report were as follows. It was Instagram was number 1, email was number 2, Facebook was number 3, Pinterest 4, and then SEO and collaborations were below that. And that was when we asked for which marketing methods are you utilizing? Those were the ones that rose to the top. They were the most frequently noted. But when I asked about the number 1 source for new lead, meaning which marketing efforts are driving the most traffic and converting to the most customers, it shifted a little bit. Instagram and email were still at the top, which is important to note. But there was also 50% of people who said they are not utilizing email marketing at all in their business.
Yeah. It's crazy, Kate.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
In this year of 2024, with all we know about how the return on investment for email marketing is so high, it is the best way to connect with our customers, to offer segmented, tailored, personalized connections and products and put those in front of people. There's, we can go as detailed as we want in the segmentations and personalizations, but at minimum, we should be having welcome emails and weekly emails going out. And 15% of 925 people don't use any email marketing at all.
Yeah. So guys, definitely go to the link because Katie has charts and stuff there. And I think it really helps to visualize this. So when you look at the charts of which marketing channels do you use and which marketing channel is your number 1 source for new customers, and you have a bar graph here, and I'm just looking at the size of those bars. And I'm looking at Pinterest is a pretty big bar in terms of which marketing channels are you using. And then when you look at the next chart, it's not a good source of new customers. And, I talk about this a lot, probably more one-on-one than I do on the podcast. I think I said it maybe the other day of, look, if there is a product-based business out there killing it with Pinterest, please contact me and let's talk about it. Because 99.9% of the people that I know, it is just a big old freaking waste of your time as a product-based business. And so it's things like that where I'm seeing this big mismatch. And then also there was a big other category in here, which I thought was kind of interesting in the number 2 spot.
Other included things like direct mail, text messaging, online events, in-person markets, because I hadn't pieced that out as its own thing. That's something we would do next time if we did this again, which we probably will. Private Facebook groups came up a few times. So the other category was things that people typed in and we curated them together. But I will say this didn't speak to me the same way as you, that Pinterest example for just to lead with that. People are allocating time to things that are not driving traffic and conversions to their website.
Right.
And that is what we want to get across to people. We want the listeners of this episode to think, what marketing methods am I utilizing and which ones are driving the most traffic? And if there's any that are not driving traffic and are taking up a lot of my time, let's get rid of them. Let's stop doing those things. Let's put more of our time and effort into the things that are already working and are helping to nurture our customers and bring in more sales. And these 2 charts side by side, you're absolutely right. It's like day and night a little bit with some of these categorizations of what people are utilizing, but what's actually resulting in money coming in the door.
Yeah. So, and again, like reading the words hits way different than looking at, at the visual, and it just makes it so much more obvious. The other thing that I found kind of interesting here was the SEO piece. I was really actually excited to see that it was in the top 5 for which
Yeah.
channels were being used, but then it sort of drops to like spot 6, which I guess they're not super off. But, again, I'm looking at these bar graphs. I do want to say with the SEO piece, my initial instinct with that, if you are working on SEO in your business and you feel like it's not really doing anything, part of me thinks, and this is not like a knock, this is because you just haven't learned how to do it yet, is you're not looking at the data right to know whether or not it's really working for you. So I think it's just not understanding how to analyze that.
That's fair. I also wondered if it was the wrong keywords. They're putting in the work, but maybe they're not utilizing the right keyword. So that's a good point about the analytics of it all, of how to read and interpret what's working.
Yeah. And remembering too, the path to purchase from when someone discovers you to when they place their order is not linear by any means. And there's going to be 7 or 10 other touch points that happen, and the SEO doesn't necessarily get the credit for it. But again, still just looking at these numbers, I was pleased to see though that the 2 top channels are the same, right? So
same. Yeah.
Most people are using Instagram, and that is their number 1 source for new customers. So I liked seeing that there. Was there anything else in this data that stood out to you that we didn't really talk about?
Similar to what we talked about with Pinterest, Facebook had a similar situation where it was one of the top ranked channels that people were spending time on, yet it was a mid-range on the effectiveness. And so that caught my eye. It struck me that a lot, and this isn't in the bar graphs that you can see on the report, but it is in the raw data. A lot of people are doing a lot of things, and they're trying to be everywhere in their marketing. And we see this in the revenue streams too, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I want to encourage people to really, truly, and I said this already, look at what's already working and focus your energy and time and money there. When we spread ourselves too thin in any aspect of our business, we're not going to see the results that we are hoping to see. And so the raw data showed me that, people are on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, keep going.
Yeah.
And really, I would rather that we look at our top 3 and invest there.
Yeah, absolutely. Most important thing you can do. I'm going to stick a link in the show notes to another episode where I talked about this and gave you some ideas for how you can be on those platforms without having to actually be on them, because they are time consuming.
Yeah.
And especially now, like this is going live in the middle of the year. Q4 is around the corner. Now is really the time to just hone in on those places where your people are at and where it's already working for you, instead of trying to do too many things. Because like you mentioned at the top of this, and what you and I talk about all the time, what I talk to my students about, is you didn't start your own business so that you could have another job that keeps you stressed out all the time and crying at your desk like I used to do at my previous day job, right? Like we did this for time freedom and traveling and being with our families, or just being able to sit on the couch and binge Netflix and not feel guilty about it. And so the goal of all of this is to say, put your blinders on and just do what your own data is telling you, and don't worry about what everybody else is doing.
I'm so glad you brought this up, because it is so easy, especially in our product world, to see someone else doing something or someone being successful with something and thinking, I have to do that too. And yes, we have to experiment in our business. We have to try new things. We have to keep it fresh and relevant. But at the same time, I think people also hold on to things for too long, and they'll continue that experiment for too long, even when it's shown that it's not effective for that particular brand. And so knowing what you want and what you need really plays into all this.
If you were talking to someone and say, hey, why don't you try this channel? Like, what is your experiment time frame?
Oh, that's a good question. It kind of depends on the channel. Like something like email marketing, I want them to have a few key pieces set up. I want the welcome sequence set up, and then I want the ongoing nurture on a consistent basis for direct to consumer. I want that weekly. For wholesale, I want it at least monthly, but frankly, more consistent than that, even 2 or 3 times a month. And I want to give that, based on the frequency, I want to give it at least a few months, probably 6 months to see. And then let's go back and look at the data. Let's look at open rates, click-through rates. Maybe let's tweak some. If we see that the opens aren't very strong, let's tweak the subject lines. If we see the clicks aren't very strong, let's tweak the call to action. So I'll even give it past that. But like I like to do kind of a 3 or 6 month check-in to then make adjustments to further test that. But like, I don't know. Some people have been playing with TikTok for 3 years and it's not really driving traffic and it's fun, but and for some of them, it is driving traffic, but for others, it's just kind of fun, but it is kind of a time suck as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Typically, if you're talking about like an outward, like a social media channel, for instance, I'm like 90 days is kind of where I would fall with that. For something with email, there is no question of whether it works. It's a question of how do you get it to work for you. And so to me, there is no time frame on that. Yes, you have your check-ins, but like you're going to be doing it always because it works.
100%. I would never tell anyone to pull their email marketing as a marketing avenue. But like you were saying, and like I was mentioning, the check-ins, the tweaking, the adjusting so that we're optimizing. I feel like that's an ongoing thing that we're going to be constantly looking at. Social and some of these other things that are popping up. Yeah, I agree. Like 3 months would probably be plenty of time to see if it's working or not.
Yeah, for sure. And I got to tell you, as someone who hasn't posted on social in a really long time, man, is it freeing. It is just like, it's so good. And what I have found with even at my previous day job, because we went from trying to do it in-house and then outsourcing it and then sort of doing a combination of the two. And I personally have found it to be one of the hardest things to outsource to an agency, unless you are spending a lot of money on that agency. And even then, there's no guarantees. So, it is sort of that thing that you have to be dedicated to doing in-house and getting the people you need. And so the fewer channels you have to be on, the more impact you can be.
Definitely.
And all of that, when I got to the part of what are your biggest struggles in your business and what are your biggest struggles as a CEO, it's really not surprising to see. Like, yes, we have the idea of acquiring new customers. That was the biggest business pain point. That makes sense. It's kind of like when you ask someone why they didn't buy something and they say price. I'm like, don't listen to them. It's kind of the same thing here. Like that is a level set of we all need new customers sometimes, but it was the keeping up with everything.
The other thing that really stood out to me was that retaining customers was pretty low down the list in terms of the current struggles. And I had a hard time understanding if that's because they've already got that dialed in, their retention strategies are strong, so it's not a pain point, or if it's just less of a priority to them and they're not focused on it and they're not worried about it. Because as we know, it's way easier to retain an existing customer and get them to purchase more frequently and in higher volume than to acquire a brand new customer. So I do wish I had a little more insight as to, okay, did this rank where it did because it's just not a priority, they're not thinking about it? Or did it rank where it is because they've already got it handled and they feel like they've got strong retention strategies in place?
Really good, important question. And just to give you guys, if you're wondering, well, man, I answered this and I thought I had it, but like, maybe I don't. Like, what should I even be aiming for? And it's going to depend on what you sell, how much it is, what the life cycle of that product is. But typically, I look for a customer return rate of 20 to 30, maybe 40-ish%. If you sell mattresses, it's going to be a lot lower than that. If you sell a hobby product or a subscription product, it's going to be a lot higher than that. If you are in the like 80% customer return rate, that's actually a concern for me. And it probably means you don't have enough new customers. But anywhere in that like 20 to 40% is usually a good signal for the majority of general businesses, just so you guys know.
And I will add on the wholesale side, that is like the bread and butter of wholesale.
Oh,
you want people coming back time and time again. So it's going to vary whether you sell wholesale or direct to consumer or both. But yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with what you said.
Yeah, that's a really good point about the distinction. Yes, wholesale, you want it to be like 80, 90, 100% would be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, all the time. Keep coming back.
Yeah, just constantly. And then with the personal struggle, it was work-life balance, burnout and mental health, decision fatigue. There was a little bit of confidence and imposter syndrome. And I think this is where you mentioned people wrote in some of what was contributing to that work-life balance was all of the caregiving, right? Whether it's children, parents, partners, pets. And I mean, that is something, look, I work from home. My husband, he technically works from home, but the jobs he does are outside of the house. But we are home a lot together, but we're not like together. Right. But because we're always here, sometimes we have to be intentional. Oh, we have to like be married. Like just existing in each other's space is not the same thing as being together. So I definitely resonate with that. And the cat who just like always wants my attention when I'm trying to record something or whatever.
Of course, always.
I don't have children, but I can only imagine what that's like. And I know, Katie, you've got a bushel of them. So
I do. The gaggle, yes. But it was interesting. I did have people write in, I wish you had added caregiving as a specific option. And I do wish you had, like, there were a couple of other things that they requested. And so we're definitely taking a look at that to see what we want to add. The work-life balance did not surprise me. The burnout and mental health, especially given the other statistics about the financial numbers, the marketing, the time, number of hours worked that people reported, the fact that they're working alone, that did not surprise me that they're feeling that. The decision fatigue, I feel like goes hand in hand with burnout and the mental health piece of it too. And of course, when you're feeling decision fatigue and burnt out, your confidence is going to dip. So it really, I mean, I'm not making light of this because I know they're very serious things, but they also, I can see it. I can understand it. I see it in my clients. I see it in myself sometimes, you know? So yeah, I was not surprised, but also I wish less people were struggling for sure.
Yeah. Looking at the numbers, I was expecting this as the struggle, right?
Same. Yeah.
And look, this is not to say I have this all figured out. I certainly don't. I feel overwhelmed and my to-do list is too long. And some days, and my husband kind of jokes with me about this sometimes, but I will go so hard and then I sit on the couch for 3 days. My brain is just like completely fried and I can't do anything. And so we are all struggling with this, but it is the outcome of doing too many things, trying to do it all by ourselves. And so, you know, it's the logical conclusion of all this other data.
Which is frankly why I included it at the end of the survey and at the end of the report, because if I led with it, I think people would have been like, what? But, you know, knowing all of the other data points, it really does, it paints a clear picture.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And so my goal with even this business existing, and I know that it is the same for you, it's like, how do we fix this and how do we help people get out of this? And so I think really, I don't know if anyone will be surprised by this data. It didn't surprise me. Granted, I talk to a lot of people all the time, but do you have any insight or any thoughts into why are we all still doing this when we like all know better? Like what is happening in the human brain here?
Right. Well, another stat that came out of this report that I thought was really interesting was that 81% of participants are holding steady or experiencing growth. And so that tells me that even though people are working hard, working long hours, working alone, not making a ton of money, they are still seeing forward progress. It's just slow progress. It's maybe not as fast as they would like. And so as a human that is really motivated for impact and bringing my gifts to the world, I know many of our creative entrepreneurs that we work with, the people making consumer gifts and things, they're the same way. You know, they feel passionately about what they're making. And if they can even just make incremental progress, that's going to keep them in the game. You know, it's a very personal thing. Running these businesses can be very personal. And so I also think the letting go of something like this is very difficult. And I did a podcast episode earlier this year where I straight up said, like, there's going to be a lot of businesses closing this year. And it's for a lot of different reasons. And I worried that I was going to sound too pessimistic. But the truth of the matter is it's getting harder and harder to run, sustain, and grow businesses now. But it's easy to get into business right now.
Yes.
And so
easy.
People hop into business thinking it's going to be all fun and games and like easy money from all the social media posts that are like, I'll make $1 million in a week. And then they feel the hard reality of like, oh, wait, no, this is a lot of energy and time and money, and I'm not moving as quickly as I can, but they don't want to give it up because they're passionate about what they're doing. And so I think it's our entrepreneurial spirit that keeps us in the game. I think it is even the incremental growth that gives us hope that things are going to get faster. Now, I also want to add here, there were a lot of businesses that are making good money. There's a lot of people who are succeeding. And by that, I mean, they're growing a business that they're really proud of. If they choose to have teams, they have teams. They have a wide range of products. They're selling through multiple sales channels, but their foundations in the business are strong enough to sustain that infrastructure.
Right.
Where we see people spreading themselves way too thin, and I think you want to get into this too a little bit, is that the businesses that are making under $25,000 in revenue and not paying themselves anything, they're coming straight out the gates and trying to do too much too soon without having that infrastructure in place. And it just makes it really hard to continue to move forward.
Yeah, I think so many good things that you said here. And I think the number one thing, which we've kind of touched on a few times, and thank you for reminding us of the respondents who do have great businesses and are paying themselves and they're growing. And the overall sense of people's attitudes is that things are good and growing. And yes, I'm still going to be in business in 5 years and all of that. And so this is not all doom and gloom, guys.
No, it's not.
But like you said, it is so easy to get started. Over the last few years, being an entrepreneur is cool and you get to travel and you get to do all these things, and it's not for everyone. And I think a lot of people have just decided this is just not for me and they're going to go back to work, and there's zero shame in that whatsoever. Some people are just so happy to be the cog in the wheel and make things move forward, and that's amazing. And so I do think that there has just been like a little bit of a shift in the attitude of what it really means to be an entrepreneur now. And it's just, there are entrepreneurial people and then there are not. And like, we need both to make the world go round. So
yeah. I also want to add here that one of the questions I wish I had asked, and we will include this in future surveys that we do, is, are you employed outside of the business? Because I think that a large chunk of the folks that are not making much money in their business or paying themselves much money from their business have other jobs. I think they're relying on outside work to pay their bills. And so I tried to get at this by asking, how many hours a week are you working, to see, like, is this a part-time business or is it a full-time business? But next time we will for sure ask, are you employed outside of the business? Is it part-time? Is it full-time? You know, is your business a side hustle or is it full-time? Because I do think those are important distinctions here that I wish we had to kind of cross compare with the numbers. And again, there's no shame in having a day job or a part-time job or working in somebody else's business. But I do think it informs kind of where people are at.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure that a good portion of those only making 25K or whatever it is, they probably are working other jobs, whether part-time, full-time, etc. I mean, hey, I did e-commerce badassery as a side hustle for like 18 months, nights and weekends and lunch breaks at work and trying to like go live on social outside when it was like really windy and it was bananas, but like you do what you got to do. So yeah, I think that is an important distinction.
Yeah, I had overlap for 4 years between my day job, my product business, and then we threw proof to product in the mix too. And I'm like, okay, something's got to give.
So I think, the big takeaway from today, and, if there's any other specifics, Katie, that you want to make sure we touch on, I'd love to just circle back to really focusing on the marketing piece, because that is what ends up driving everything else. And then also kind of circling back to the delegation piece, because that is the bottleneck. So you can do all the great marketing things, but if then you're trying to fulfill that demand all by yourself, you are naturally going to get burnt out. So if there's 2 things that anyone can fix, it's those. But are there any other specific numbers or data points that you want to make sure we touch on?
Yeah, in the same realm of people are doing too much, I did want to talk about revenue streams. People are doing a lot. They're selling through a lot of different revenue streams. And, I can't find it. But I did pull some specific data for you because I knew you were like, what are people doing? How many are they doing? So here's a couple of things I wanted to share with you. So of the group of people that are earning less than $25,000 in revenue in their business, so not what they're paying themselves, although pretty much everyone that was in this bracket was also paying themselves under $25,000. But of them, it was kind of split. 50% were doing 3 or fewer revenue streams. So they were keeping it pretty tight, doing only 3 things. And 50% were doing 4 or more revenue streams. Some of them were doing 7.
Oh my
So
God.
So they're making less than $25,000 in revenue a year, but they're spreading themselves across 7 different revenue streams in some cases. And that tells me why. That's a big indicator of why they're making the money they're making. If they're to focus on 1 or 2 things, they would likely be doing more. And almost all of those folks were working alone. A very small percentage have 1 or 2 people, whether it was an employer or contractor working with them. And most of those folks were newer businesses. Now, comparing this to brands that were making over $500,000 in revenue, so it was a 500,000 bracket plus the over $1 million bracket, 24% of them had 1, 2, or 3 revenue streams that they were working in. So a smaller percent are focused on smaller number of revenue streams.
Yeah.
But 76% of them have 4 or more. But the interesting part here is the large majority of those businesses, they have been in business for at least 3 years. So they've fumbled their way around trying to figure out what some of that infrastructure needs to look like.
Yep.
I would say most of the people in that category, though, have been in business for over 10 years because these things do take time, right? So they've had time to figure stuff out. And majority of the people in this bracket had 4 or more people working for them. A lot of them had 5+, but I said 4 because there were some people in the 3 to 5 range too.
Yep.
My point is they've had time to figure out what infrastructure pieces they need in place. They've had time and knowledge now, experience to recruit the right people to delegate to get more done. And they're able to diversify their revenue stream because they have the infrastructure and the people in place. And so they can successfully diversify. One of the main things I see folks in my communities doing too quickly is spreading themselves too thin, diversifying too fast, and not having the systems and processes in place to support that, or even the people in place to support that. And that was reflected in this survey data as well.
Oh, yes. I do remember when this first released, and I felt I felt so bad because you had already spent so much time with this data. And I'm like Voxer messaging her, and I'm like, well, what about this? And what about this? And did you see the way that this correlated with that? And I was like, I'm sorry, I'm going to stop. We can pick this up another time. And it was exactly as I suspected. So, I think the takeaway there is, and this is the same for everything, right? Same thing when you're thinking about your marketing channels. Get really good at the thing you are doing before you try and do something else. And you can look at any business and the same principle applies, right? Like the number one mistake brick and mortar businesses make is opening too many stores too close to one another in succession in time, not even physically. You got to give each one time to create that well-oiled machine before you can move on to the next, because then your attention is all over the place and you can't do anything well. And the first few people you hire, highly likely they're going to suck and you're going to have to replace them. Okay? I've been hiring and firing people for a very long time, friends. That is pretty much always the case. We all just have to do less. The good news is 99% of the time, doing less equals making more money.
Yeah. And I just want to extrapolate what you said even further. Focusing on one thing, getting it to be a well-oiled machine applies to your marketing, your hiring, the products that you're offering, any new outside offers that you're doing, like expanding into licensing or, coaching or any of these other things that you have an eye on. It applies to everything in your business. And so focus on one thing at a time, get it running really well, and then you can add in a new layer of some sort.
Yeah.
I will say too, my biggest kind of general observation through this was that the money comes when your business foundations are strong, which is what we're talking about here. And that takes time and it takes patience. And I think we need to reset our expectations a little bit about what we want from our businesses, how long we're willing to put in the work to see the results we're looking for, and also be willing to ask for help when you need it as well.
And this is a hard pill to swallow for every entrepreneur. But when you see the person who went from having no business to making X figures in a short amount of time, or they go on TikTok and they blow up, those are the exceptions, not the rule.
Yes.
Ignore them, honestly. Just because it worked for them, it's very unlikely to work for you. It's just not how these things work. a lot of stars have to align for all of that to come together. So they are the exception, not the rule. And that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you, with your business, with your product, like none of that. And I think let's blame it on Amazon, okay? Like they conditioned all of us to expect 2-day shipping. We've got food delivery, like all of these conveniences that have built up around us. We are just conditioned for like immediate gratification in everything. And that's just not how it works. You know, in so many other things in our lives, there's technology and all of this stuff that we can make that immediate gratification happen. Not in business, friends. Like, maybe if you have a ton of money to dump into paid ads, and even that is not a guarantee, you know? Yeah. Okay. So now that we've gotten through, and again, guys, go check out the link and there'll be a whole bunch of resources for you in the show notes. And Katie shares so many resources for the things that you need to dig into on the actual survey results page as well. But just to give them like a little bit of an immediate takeaway for today, what are the first 3 things they should go do after listening to this?
Yeah. You know, first go read the report at proofyourproduct.com/2024 survey, because I think it will really enlighten you as to what the state of the industry is right now. And I also want to add here too, that one of my main reasons for doing this survey now is that I feel that we're in a recalibration phase post-COVID, post-extra funding happening, and we're getting back to kind of what the sales volume and flow was like prior to COVID, in my opinion. I mean, there's definitely nuance to that. There's new technologies now that weren't around then and stuff. And obviously the Amazon effect was then, but it's also more now. And so there's other things. But I think the report sheds a lot of good light that slow, steady growth is how strong businesses are built. And so I want folks that are especially new in their business journey to go take a hard look at that and think to themselves, am I in this for the long haul? Am I willing to make these concessions? And what do I want this business to look like? So first, go read the report. I think the second thing to do is to look at your own data points and see what is truly working for you and do more of that, like we talked about earlier in this episode. Get rid of the clutter. Get rid of the things that are not serving your specific business. I don't care what your friends in the business are doing, like other businesses. Like, focus on the things that are moving the needle for you. And when I say moving the needle, I mean bringing in the most revenue, attracting the right kind of clients. You know, what can you do to move your business forward towards your definition of success and what that looks like? So those are the 2 things I would tell you. Like, look at what the industry is doing so you're knowledgeable and understand what's happening, but really, truly turn inward and look at your own data points and make sure that you're on the path towards your definition of success and eliminate all other distractions and things that are no longer working for you.
Yeah. And remember that a no today is not a no forever. It doesn't mean that you could be picking that up in 6 months' time, because when you have your focus so dialed in, you will go so much further faster. And so you can get that to the point where it's well-oiled and doing its own thing, and then you can go try something else. And, you know, the other thing, and it would not be an e-commerce badassery podcast if I didn't say this, and I say this with so much love and understanding. But if anyone in the 15% of people who said they are not using email in their product-based business is listening, please, 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 I will put email resources. I know Katie has email resources. Just start doing it. Done is better than perfect. And just remember that every email you send is an opportunity for you to make sales. And I feel a little bit like a preacher in this moment, but we're recording this on July 26th. And recently there's been some controversy on the internet with Sticker Mule, if you guys are familiar. Now, I 100% understand and empathize with those who are feeling both ways. Like, I get there's 2 sides to this, and there's a whole bunch of people in the middle, and it's not even about the actual controversy. But you know where it started?
The email.
And that drama, as horrific as it all was, I said to one of my friends, and I'm like, well, it's a good argument that email is not dead. People are paying attention to their email. And so please just utilize it in your business. I beg you.
Please, I do too. It's just such a great way to connect with your customers and to be of service to them while also selling more of your products.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Katie, so much for doing the survey, for being here, for entertaining all of my questions.
Jessica, I loved your questions because one, I had already been thinking of a lot of them, but two, like to hear outside perspective. Because, when you work on projects like this, you are like deep in the weeds. I mean, me and this Airtable are like intimate with the amount of time we've spent together. And like, I think it's important you have similar audience that I have. What questions are they asking? What other information would they like to know? How can we make this better for the next round too, to help more people? So no, I appreciated all your questions and it really helped me think about things in other ways too. So thank you.
Amazing. You are so welcome. It's just a joy. I'm so grateful that the universe brought us together.
Same.
Please tell everyone, I'm sure they already know who you are, but just in case, like, where can they find you? If they want to learn more from you, where do they go?
Sure. So I'm at prooftoproduct.com for our podcast, for our programs. I'm on social media everywhere at Proof to Product as well. Instagram is where I hang out most. You can get the survey at prooftoproduct.com/2024 survey. We are known for teaching people how to wholesale. That's what my main priority and focus is. But of course, we touch on all the other things that go into running a product-based business as well. We've got some upcoming programs and a lot of free resources for you, including our podcast. So definitely head to the website, prooftoproduct.com, and check it all out. And if you have any follow-up questions after this interview or after reading the survey, go ahead and send me a DM on Instagram at Proof to Product.
Amazing. Thank you. And of course, all of those links will be in the show notes. Katie has also been on the show before, so I'll stick links to those. Thank you guys for being here and just keeping an open mind and, let the data drive your decisions. As hard as it can be, I promise you that once you get over the initial hump, it makes your life so much easier and more joyful and can make you love your business again. So
100%.
Just learn to love the data. Thank you so much for hanging out with us till the end. I hope you're having a kick-ass rest of your day, and I'll see you on the flip side. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you want to learn more about growing your e-commerce business, get started with my free resource library at ecommercebadassery.com/free stuff and get an invite to the Lounge, my e-commerce marketing membership. When you're ready for one-on-one support, apply to work with me at ecommercebadassery.com/apply. Before you go, would you do me a quick favor? Leave a rating and review and tap that follow button. This pushes me up the chart so I can support more scrappy e-commerce entrepreneurs just like you. I'm on a mission to reach as many as I can, and I could really use your help. Thanks so much in advance. Until next time, e-commerce friend, stay badass.